Welcome back. So the material we're looking at today is a really deep psychological dive into Kafka's work, framing it as a kind of diagnosis for modern anxiety and our search for meaning.
And it's a fantastic piece of work, genuinely strong. The core idea that Kafka is diagnosing the human condition itself, not just society, that's a really compelling hook. But I think we can make that claim even more bulletproof.
Okay, so let's jump right in. The material comes out swinging with this claim that Kafka, understood people more deeply than most philosophers ever did, that he predicted things like anxiety and imposter syndrome.
It's a brilliant, bold claim. I love it. But a claim that big also comes with a burden of proof. It seems to me the material makes this compelling claim about Kafka's unique depth, but it could use stronger grounding against the very philosophical schools it's claiming to surpass.
Right. If you say he's better than the philosophers, you have to actually bring them into the ring, so to speak. You mean thinkers like the existentialists?
Exactly. People like Sartre, Camus, they were grappling with these same ideas of, identity loss and a meaningless universe. The weakness here is that by not engaging with them directly, the argument kind of leaves itself open. A reader who knows their philosophy may just think, isn't this just Sartrean angst in a weird story?
I see. So without that comparison, Kafka's genius might seem a bit isolated, maybe even accidental, instead of being this groundbreaking insight?
Precisely. So the suggestion is to integrate the analysis more explicitly with that intellectual tradition. The goal isn't just to name drop them, but to show how Kafka's literary approach is different and, as the piece argues, more powerful.
You're saying we should show the difference between experiencing a story and just reading a theory?
Yes. For example, the material talks a lot about Gregor Samsa losing his identity through sacrifice and duty.
Waking up as a bug because he's basically been living like one.
Right. So you could briefly juxtapose that with Sartre's concept of bad faith, the idea of willingly living like an object defined by your job or your role.
So Sartre gives you the theory, but Kafka gives you the body horror.
Exactly. You can show how Kafka makes that philosophical idea physical and, frankly, disgusting. The transformation into a vermin is the ultimate consequence of surrendering your humanity. That's a literary experience, not an abstract concept. It proves the point in a way philosophy can't.
I see. The contrast itself makes the argument for you. What about with the trial?
Same idea. The piece talks about Joseph K. fighting charges that are never made clear.
That feeling of being judged by some invisible authority for a crime you don't even know.
So you compare that directly to Camus and the philosophy of the absurd. This idea that we search for meaning in a universe that offers none. Camus explains the problem, but Kafka builds the labyrinth. He makes you feel the bureaucratic nightmare of cosmic indifference. Making those sharp comparisons really substantiates that opening claim.
That's a great way to bolster it. Okay, so that leads us to the structure of that diagnosis. The material has this really powerful insight about how Kafka's systems crush you with confusion, not just violence, and that leads to this internalized guilt.
It's one of the strongest points in the whole piece. I'm just thinking about how we can structure that insight for maximum clarity. Right now, the analysis of Kafka's bureaucratic nightmares effectively shows the internal weight of it, but I think it could be strengthened by structurally separating the critique of the external system from the internal self-punishment that follows.
So you're saying it sometimes mashes together the cause and the effect. The shifting rules of the system on one hand and the character's guilt on the other.
Yes, precisely. The connection is obviously there. One causes the other. But when you blend them too closely, you risk diluting the power of the external critique. The piece says, the system isn't designed to end, it's designed to exhaust you. That is a brilliant line.
But if you immediately pivot to the character's anxiety, you might lose sight of the fact that the system itself is the villain. The problem is architectural.
Exactly. The system is built to create guilt as a tool of control. So the suggestion is simply to create a sharper structural division. Call it the external system versus the internal system. Let the listener really see and feel the cruelty of the institution first before we get into the psychological fallout.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Give each threat its own spotlight. How would that look in practice?
Well, for example, before you even get to how Joseph K. starts to believe he must be guilty, you could dedicate a specific moment to the structure of the castle.
Where the goal is to chase, not to arrive?
Right. Emphasize that the system is unreachable because it's designed that way. That isolates the institutional malice. Then you can show how that malice gets internalized.
I see. And for In the Penal Colony?
I would focus sharply on the core destructive logic of that machine. The premise that guilt is never to be doubted. That is the terrifying bedrock of the whole system.
And that feels very modern.
It is. So you connect it. You explicitly link that illogic, the exhaustion, the manufactured doubt to something contemporary. Maybe it's a toxic workplace where the goalposts are always moving, or even the judgment cycles on social media, where accusation is enough. Separating them like this makes it clear. The anxiety is the symptom, the system is the disease.
That really clarifies the argument. Okay, let's turn to the end, the part you've called the Kafka code. This is the pivot from diagnosis to a kind of solution. It's very inspirational with lines like meeting does not come from approval.
Yeah, and you need that note of hope after everything we've been through. My only thought here is that the Kafka code conclusion, while powerful, relies on these very abstract ideas, self-trust, clarity, truth, and I think it would be so much stronger if it were anchored back to a concrete moment of resistance from the books themselves.
I get that. After spending all this time in the grime and confusion of the novels, suddenly shifting to high-level philosophy feels...
A little disconnected?
Yeah, exactly. It kind of floats away and you lose that visceral Kafka feeling.
Right, so the suggestion is to ground that abstract message of hope in a specific, undeniable image from the text. Use a moment of humanity from one of the characters to prove the point, not just state it.
So you want the prescription to be as tangible as the diagnosis was.
Yes, think about it. The conclusion talks about choosing self-worth over usefulness. Well, is there a more perfect example of that than Gregor Samsa's final human moment?
When he hears his sister playing the violin.
When he hears his sister playing the violin. He's this monstrous, useless thing, a burden to his family, and yet he hears the music and asks himself, was he an animal that music could move him so?
That's the one part of him the system couldn't crush, his response to beauty.
That's it. Use that specific image. The actionable step isn't just find your inner truth, it's hold on to the part of you that still responds to the violin. It demonstrates that this inner worth isn't just a nice idea. It's a real, enduring force, proven in the text, no matter how much life has, distorted your outer form.
That makes the conclusion so much more powerful. It's not just advice, it's an image that sticks with you. It ties everything together.
It makes the solution feel earned.
Absolutely. This has been incredibly helpful. So, to quickly recap the main points. First, to really land that opening claim, bring the philosophers like Camus and Sartre into the conversation to highlight just how unique Kafka's literary, visceral approach really is.
Second, clarify the structure by creating that sharp divide between the external, cruel systems and the internal guilt they produce. Really focus on the architecture of the nightmare before you get to the psychological effect.
And finally, ground that hopeful Kafka conclusion in the literature itself. Use that powerful, concrete image of Gregor and the violin to make the message of liberation feel real and earned, not just abstract.
Exactly. This is already such a strong piece of analysis. The expertise is clear. These are really just strategic refinements to make it completely unassailable. I genuinely hope you'll implement them and send it back our way. We'd love to see it again.